On another matter, in 3 weeks, America will celebrate Independence Day. For 244 years, Americans have fought, marched, voted, petitioned, legislated, published, protested, and died to defend and build our blessings of freedom. The American experiment has plenty of battle scars and growing pains handed down from one generation to the next. The first half of 2020 shows us there's plenty of historical wounds to heal and challenges to overcome. In the interest of public health, stay-at-home orders limited individual freedoms that many Americans take for granted, including the right to earn a living or to worship with fellow believers. Just as the economy began to reopen, the shadows of racial injustice darkened America's doorstep. All people are created equal, but not all people are treated equally. The unconscionable suffocation of George Floyd at the knee of a police officer in Minneapolis struck a chord of unity to end racism in America. Hundreds of thousands of people have gathered to exercise their First Amendment rights. They marched to protect racial injustice and police brutality. Unfortunately, some exploited the peaceful protests to riot, loot, vandalize, and burn. These criminal acts were not protected by the Constitution. It's obvious they aren't protected. They were antithetical to the laws of the land protecting life, liberty, and domestic tranquility. All of this led one of my colleagues, the junior senator from Arkansas, to submit an essay to the New York Times. In his opinion piece, he advocated why he thought the president ought to use his authority to deploy active duty military forces to uphold the law and public order, as had been done by presidents in past instances of civil unrest. The Times op-ed pages accepted his column and published it online under the headline, quote unquote, "Bring in the troops." Within hours, the newsroom was in a frenzy. The left wing rallied their troops to stop the press. The New York Times, as we know, prides itself as the paper of record. Since 1851, it has served as an influential platform to gather and report the news and to hold governments accountable. Policemen keep the public peace. Journalists are policemen of our political system to keep the political system honest and open and transparent. The New York Times opinion pages ostensibly provide a space for free exchange of ideas and thought-filled conversation on issues of the day. I've long counted journalists as the constables of the Fourth Estate. They serve a very vital role in bolstering our system of checks and balances. They have a responsibility to set the tone for open dialogue. Last week, the New York Times flunked this standard. The Gray Lady ghosted Senator Collins' opinion piece after a meltdown in the ivory tower when its ivory tower workforce hyperventilated. It's certainly reasonable to disagree on the merits and to debate if recent events rise to the level of past riots that justified invoking the Insurrection Act. I certainly think we should be hesitant to deploy our military forces domestically, even in difficult situations. But the overheated reaction by alleged journalists, even to have this debate, raises the question, do they consider themselves neutral reporters or activists for a certain worldview? Even a casual reader is able to read between the lines and know that the New York Times ascribes to a left-leaning ideology. But the mutiny in their newsrooms seems to cross the line from journalism with a left-wing bias to political activism and ideological conformity. Sadly, last week, the New York Times lowered the bar of journalistic integrity. It snubbed a voice of dissent and rebuked the free exchange of ideas. The First Amendment protects 5 fundamental freedoms that sets America apart as the leader of the free world: freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and the right to petition the government. The Constitution does so because the expression of diverse opinions is necessary to preserve liberty. Within 4 days of publishing Senator Cotton's commentary, the New York Times caved to an ideological revolt in the newsroom. Under mob rule, the casualty among its ranks was none other than the editorial page editor. He was forced out of his job for having the audacity to publish an opinion of a U.S. senator. At first, the publisher made a feeble effort to stand on principle, defending, in his words, openness and a range of opinions. Within a few days, the publisher threw James Bennett under the bus. It's a sad day for journalism, a sad day for the free press. These actions damage the wall dividing the newsroom and the opinions desk. They solidified their silo of left-wing thought. Canceling dissenting views is a very slippery slope. Sooner or later, it mutes the exchange of ideas in a free society. As a student of history, I know that freedom has often been threatened by those who were convinced their views were on the right side of history. I offer a bit of wisdom without malice to the New York Times. Don't back down from the First Amendment. Swapping a free press for party line propaganda and punishing dissent is not a good look. Ask the people of North Korea, China, and Iran. On Independence Day 2020, I encourage members of the media and all Americans to step out of your comfort zones and seek to understand other viewpoints. Before we can expand America's promise, end racism, and beat the virus, we must come together as Americans. No matter one's race, politics, creed, wealth, celebrity, remember, we're bound together by self-evident truths, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I want even a left-wing newspaper to be a responsible policeman for our political system. I yield the floor.